So we're gonna go ahead and get started. I just really have just a couple series of questions regarding to education this year and the upcoming school year and what this is gonna look like. So thank you for joining me. Obviously, we have to start off by importantly acknowledging that MindSpark does sit on Native Ute land. And I just want to acknowledge that. So I also want to give a disclaimer and say that, the experience that you're going to be sharing with us is kind of just going to be your experience. And I know we've worked with a lot of different educators and they might have a different experience as well, or insight into what the upcoming school year will look like. And again, this is a partnership from the Aspen Institute, where we were awarded to be able to provide free resources. And my name is Daisy Martinez. I am the Director of Professional Learning at MindSpark. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started because I would love to have your input and your knowledge and expertise on these questions. So my first question for you is, what resources do you think would most benefit students for the upcoming school year?
In my opinion, I think getting back to as close as normal as possible. That'll help with the mental health, not just from hearing what other students have to say about our other kids that put their opinions in.
Yeah, so kind of thinking about prioritizing mental health before we start talking about the academics, before we start talking about the learning gaps and what they did and didn't do. It's really making sure that they show up and feel okay.
Right.
And I think, when we talk about students too, we have to talk about their families, everybody that is related in their family unit. So what resources do you think families are going to need this upcoming school year? And I'll just quickly add, because they took on a big role this year that they did not sign up for. So what resources do you think that they will need?
I guess it just depends on whether parents decide to put their kids back into like full in-person schooling, are doing the virtual. I believe some schools under reservation are giving those options to students. I know that's currently how it's working now. But resources like we talked about before, MindSpark would be a good resource for them, just because of the technology and having that support and having somewhere to turn to when they're stumped or stuck on something.
Right. So just, I think when we go back to normal, maybe things will be more hands off, but the reality is that, the same needs are still going to be there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also promoting a more like mental health structure for in-home families, or families, I should say. I'm sorry, but having some kind of mental health structure, maybe like different exercises and things that they can work on at home before coming back into school or during school, or all the time actually. So.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, because you first said that like equipping students to have what they need to take care of their mental health, but that also means their families need that too, and it shouldn't just live at school, it should be a part of everything.
Exactly.
All right,
exactly.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and move to our next question. So although this was a crazy tumultuous year and everything was disrupted and normal was thrown out the door. So, but what was a highlight from this year? Like, what would you say, either that you heard students say that kind of surprised you and made you think, oh, maybe there were some good things that happened this year?
From personal experience and like listening to my nieces, one was being able to spend a little bit more time together as a family. But for me, personally, for me, an unexpected highlight was realizing I could still do the schoolwork.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So like helping my nieces and getting back into that setting, it was just really like I was taken back because it just as an adult, you're not really too involved in those kind of things. Like you kind of just leave it on to the teacher.
Mhm.
So that was kind of for me, that was a good highlight.
Yeah, and I think a lot of parents, even if they were intimidated by it or stressed out by it, because I think that also happened, I think it really brought school closer to them. And I think hopefully it helped them build a closer connection to their kids and kind of talk about education together in the house, which is so easy to kind of have education be one thing and school live over there and then home is over here. But I agree. I do think that's probably a highlight from this year. All right, so I just have a couple more questions. So I know that you work with the youth very regularly. You're also at the shelter. And so I know in your work, it's always important to get their insight and to kind of see what their thoughts are. So what are some reflections or thoughts that students have shared with you that have stuck with you? And I know even before this year, you've always been in constant communication, but can you think of some things that students have said to you that have really stayed with you?
I th- I think the frustration of not having that normal life, um, the frustration and yeah, it would just basically have to be the frustration and not control it, not being able to control something, and like not being able to get their class schedules, things like that. So,
Yeah, and in the frustration, I think it also required a lot of empathy from the
mm,
adults near them as well.
it was like the whole thing, the reflections and the thoughts and like listening and like even going to the youth shelter, like the adults seeing their frustration too, because a lot of them aren't tech savvy. So going virtual is where it caused a lot of frustration for people and not being able to have that person to person interaction.
Yeah, and I think also all of those frustrations also sound like there was like a lot of vocalizing of like social connection matters a lot. And if we're not getting it, even if the tech isn't working, like at the root of it, we're missing our, being around people. All right, so I just have a couple more questions. So thank you again, Mary. What were some effective strategies that you saw educators or families implement? So we've been able to work with quite a few schools and a lot of different educators, and we've seen that, they've all been able to find what works for them. But, based on what students have told you or what you've seen, or I know you have educators in your family, what have been some effective things that you've seen?
Stronger infrastructures in the families, like building those infrastructures around their children. Like for my sisters, just seeing them taking that time out of their work, to come home and just to make sure, basically becoming the teachers. So it would have to be stronger infrastructure.
Yeah, like, and I think that also probably came from like relying on one another a little bit more. Like if we're all in the house, we all are going to be dependent of each other's success. And so you would say like the ineffective strategy is like time as well, like putting in that
Time,
time.
yeah, putting in that time and, like I said, just moving your lives around, uh, to think, moving your lives around to places that you're not familiar with or not accustomed to.
Right, because like it was hard as much as like, and luckily things are changing, but as much as we all kind of didn't want this, this school year to look like that, we had to be flexible in that sense.
Very, very flexible.
All right, so I just have a couple more questions, I guess one more question. So how did this school year inform your perspective moving forward? So I know, as vaccines are available and they're being rolled out and people are vaccinated, and I know some of the schools that we've talked about, they think, things might be well enough for them to go back to in-person, try to figure out a new normal. What do you think, you yourself have been informed in this upcoming school year?
I would have to say implementing more of a cultural aspect into education.
Mhm.
Education's kind of like mainstream, like and it should be a little bit more diverse.
Mhm.
So culture and implementing more cultural based our cultural education would be good. Oh, there's so many things actually. There's so many things that we can do to help move forward this coming school year. But for me, personally, it'd be the culture part.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think a lot of students are wanting that too.
Yeah.
Like they're ready for that. And I think, yes, the pandemic happened, but a lot of other things happened. And they've all been paying attention to the state of things. Um, how do you think that, schools in general should move forward? So yes, incorporating the culturally responsive education. How else do you think, what do you think schools will need to keep students engaged?
That's a tough one. I I don't really know because I'm not in that school setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if I would have to say, I would have to say encouraging family structure,
Mm-hmm.
just because right now, like with my nieces and like hearing them coming back from school or something, and then they say, well, there was only 7 kids at school today, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's together with the kids online and the kids in person. So how do schools encourage that from homes, from families?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, like, I guess from the perspective of your nieces, like if they're showing up every day and they're doing the work and they probably don't want to be there either, how do you think that has impacted them?
The older one, it kind of, in a sense, like it motivated her.
Mm-hmm.
It motivated her. Um, she, as far as I can tell, she genuinely enjoys school. She was really happy to be back in school. So I think a lot of that turns over into her motivation.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I definitely think that some students are going to be grateful for school, because I think that it's easy to like think of school as like something that will never change. But I think that this year, especially for the kids that are a little bit older, they realize that like school brings a lot of structure or a lot of comfort or a lot
Mm.
of normalcy. And as soon as that was disrupted, I think it brought a different appreciation. And then in terms of the kids that just like unfortunately didn't get engaged and stay engaged, how do you think, you know, they can be supported so that maybe that was just for 1 year, but moving forward, they can continue to like want to be in school and want to kind of be engaged in their education?
That's funny. I had a conversation with Dave about this yesterday. But anyways,
It's on everybody's mind right now.
right, because
Yeah.
we're just like, because I'm kind of struggling right now with like keeping my numbers up with the youth coming to activities and stuff. And so
Mhm.
yesterday we were talking like, do what like we have to take a different approach, but what approach do we take?
Mhm.
There's so many options out there, and there's so many different kids, and they're just like so many different learning mechanisms that they have. And so that's a tough question. That really is. And I I think about it all the time. Like, I can't really pinpoint anything because there's, like I said, there's so many things we can do.
Right, right. And I think it has to be a collective effort too. It can't just be on the school or on the parents, but kind of like a communication between all groups.
Mhm.
And so I guess, can you share a little bit about just your experience working with the youth this year compared to previous years?
Obviously, uh, we're not in the normal anymore. But
Right.
so like in the past, it was a little bit better. It was better because I had those opportunities to actually go out and pick up the kids and bring them in. So a lot of it has to, like, for me personally, well, like providing the transportation, but providing the tools, the activities is what brought them to us.
Hmm.
And then this year, it was just, I felt defeated at times
Hmm.
because then I wanted to keep doing things that I was normally used to doing, but then we couldn't do it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you bring up a good point. So it kind of seems like there was a real value in the gathering, you know? Not, and like maybe it wasn't even the activities, maybe it was just the fact that they knew they could be in a space with one another.
right. It kind of, and then from this and then to this year, it kind of hindered our growth. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
not just as a growth as like an organization or as a program, but also as individuals, because it's just something that we couldn't control. Like, none of us can control it. So, and I think we live in a society
Yeah.
where we control everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, like, I was frustrated myself because I was like, damn, man, we're only in April. They say we're only like 1 month into this pandemic and they're telling me we're going to be in this for 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do? So that
Yeah,
was,
and even like talking about this reminds me of how it felt. And just like the fact that we have been in this for like a while. So I guess, a lot of the organizations that we work with too, they're facing the similar struggles, similar challenges, and similar highlights that the TP Raisers are dealing with. So what advice would you give to organizations that are very similar to kind of the ones that you're a part of?
the best advice I can give is to just keep on keeping on.
Mm,
Like, if there's any obstacles that get in front of you, just like look for ways to resolve it in a positive way, and then move on. If you can't, come back to it and figure something out, come back to it to get through it. But just keep on keeping on.
yes, no, I love that. I think it's easy to like get stuck on the little things and focus on what you can't control, but sometimes just moving forward helps mitigate that.
Yeah, it's really easy to get stuck on something though.
Yeah. And I guess, for my last question, because I know we're kind of close to time, is we talked a lot about mental health and the importance for students and, making sure that they have all of the skills, the strategies, the resources so that they can feel successful and that they don't get overwhelmed by their emotions and their mental health. But I think educators too have kind of struggled with their mental health. What advice or what resources have you seen be successful for us adults that are kind of still dealing with the same kind of mental health problems?
I don't know if this is gonna apply, but like I kind of get on TikTok a lot, and I
Me
watch these
too.
videos. Bro, it's addicting.
It's like little videos of joy, like
Right. Yeah.
me too. I always like I feel like when I hear that, when people hear me say that, they're like, oh, she's 12.
No, actually there's some really good videos, and I follow this lady. She's a teacher, but like I just recently started like seeking professional help for myself, like for my mental stability, and listening to or watching her TikToks and like watching her grow is like inspiring, so like even using those little TikTok videos, you get inspired by them, and just seeing the growth is good. It's good to see.
Yes, Mary, I love that. And I love that like that's an easy way to connect with students too, because they love it as well. Like they know what it is. They're on
Yeah.
and so I always kind of bring it up because it's also very informational. Like as you're seeing the growth and you're kind of seeing the mental health resources, the education resources, I've also learned a lot through native TikTok, which is also like a very beautiful thing to be a part of. And I think that, it helps students, feel like their voice matters. Even if they have like 2 followers, it's still like a great tool. I'm glad that we're on the same page of that, because I know some people are like, no more social media. Kids need less of that, which is kind of true, but
It's like you have to move with their times to keep up with them, though. you know
exactly.
so like if you want to relate to them, you have to relate to them on every single level, even if
Mhm.
you don't agree with the social media.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice too, because I think students are gonna, once they're back in the classroom and they're gonna be sitting at their desks, they're gonna be used to something that captured their attention like immediately, and they're gonna want that. So I think you bring up a really good point of like meeting them where their needs are right now.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like like you said, it's instant. It's
Mhm.
instant. So us older ones have to get with it.
Mary, I love that. I love that. Yes. TikTok means a lot to me.
Seriously. Then
I
I
won't tell
like
you, I won't tell you how long I'll be on there though.
uh no, there's it's good and it's bad, because you get so into it, and then pretty soon you're like, oh shit. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right. You're like,
So
oh, that was how many hours?
are you serious? I spent my whole Saturday on this.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But I agree. There's little, even like sharing little wisdom, and like I think to me too is like how people really share their culture on there, and like are able to share their experience and use their voice. I think that that can also be helpful to inspire students. And I know we're kind of at time, but I know you said that the TP Raisers did a TikTok challenge with the youth. And I was wondering if you have time to kind of go over that. If not, that is totally fine.
No, that's still a work in progress.
Oh,
With the
cool.
TikTok challenge
Yeah.
for Gen 7.
Yes.
Yeah, they're still working on that. We had like 3 different rough drafts,
Mhm.
but they haven't decided yet. I mean, it's too hard to pick just one, because they're all
Yeah.
good. They're all good. But I wanted to say something like uh TikTok or any social media platform, depending on how it is used, it can be a good educational tool.
I
You know,
agree.
so
I agree. And I think students are more likely to be kind of vulnerable. And, if, especially now that we're so disconnected, it's going to be easier to see where they are by, kind of relating to them in that way.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, Mary, we are at time. Thank you so much for sharing, your perspective. I think it's going to mean a lot. And I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate. to what you've shared. And, we're all thinking these things right now of like, this year went by fast and slow, but this upcoming school year is coming and we have to be prepared for it. And we have to make sure that we're prioritizing students, that our teachers feel supported. So thank you so much for kind of giving us an insight into your perspective and talking about the youth that you serve.
Not a problem. Thank you for inviting me.